Hello, and welcome to our Lymond Book Club. I'm Laura.
Hi, I'm Deanne.
And I'm Philippe.
We are reading Pawn and Frankincense by Dorothy Dunnett, and we are going to cover chapters 19, 20, and 21. Any initial reactions you guys want to share to these chapters before we dive in?
I don't know. These chapters seemed to just sort of further the plot. I mean, there are some major things that happen, but like especially this first chapter is just sort of Jared and the group getting to Constantinople and like learning what we've already known. So this just seems to be a lot of exposition in these.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't find anything really surprising in these chapters because it was like Gabriel's in power and Lymond's gonna suffer and like their plan for getting the children out will not work, but I expected all of that because we're at this point in the book, so they can't win yet. So I knew it was gonna be like obstacle. Gabriel's terrible. Like, I love that scene where Philippa was listening. We'll get there, but I love the scene where Philippa was listening to their interaction. And I like that at the end of this section, like Lymond's on his own again. We sort of, it's like the lone hero, facing, but he has help. So he just goes off on his own, but then he gathers help again, which I really think is one of his strengths. I mean, just to like talk about Lymond in general for a second, like I think one of his strengths and weaknesses maybe, but is his ability to sort of gather people around him and inspire people or frustrate people. Like his interaction with the way that he's able to sort of fold in people into his cause and inspire them and all of that. So I like seeing that in action, and I like seeing that play out. So
I have to say that last time I listened to the audiobook of this, even though I've read the book many times, I was like, washing dishes or something, like multitasking. And that moment when Gabriel reveals that it's him that they're meeting, I just like screamed because he's so scary. And even though like I knew he was coming and I knew he wasn't dead, obviously, and I read the book before, he's so scary in this.
Yeah, it's just so awful. And he's so awful. It's just.
I think that even after reading everything that he's done in the last book and this book, I still underestimated him because I can't fathom how he's able to get so far in the Turkish Empire so quickly, unless he's been doing background power struggles this whole time that we didn't know.
Yeah, because he talks about that. He talks about how like for 10 years they've been courting him, and he's been like playing this Turkish role, this choice.
Yeah.
He's been doing. It's been going on for a decade.
And so. I understand that, and I know that. I did get that part, but like I still don't understand how this Turkish Empire, how the Sultan would let an outsider be the third strongest man in the empire, even after how many years of courting. I can't fathom that. Like, unless he's this paragon of virtue and skill, which, I mean, this is why I say I still feel like I'm underestimating him. So
I think it's a combination of he has secrets to sell them that they really want, like all the inner workings of the Knights of Malta and probably a lot about the other European powers. But also, like, we've seen how he works. He's so manipulative and so devious.
And I just want to like walk up to the Sultan and shake him and be like, get rid of him. He's going to overthrow you. Like, that's his goal. He wants to be the Sultan, and it's going to happen if you let him.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not, because Gabriel's not a real person and that's not what really happened, but I'm sure that's what Gabriel's goal is. So
yeah, and it's not like if the Sultan gets a hint that Gabriel is attempting to overthrow him, he's gonna kill him. I mean, he killed his son. Like, we saw that happen in the book. So I don't think he's gonna feel any sort of loyalty to Gabriel other than his secrets. Like, so Gabriel, I think, is gonna play off that I still have secrets, you can't get rid of me lever against the you're a threat, I want to kill you lever. And we'll see how those go back and forth.
which, to bring up the fact that the Sultan kills his son, I think you can totally read that as another plot of Gabriel's, to like throw in this idea that your son is sort of betraying you.
I totally read that as a plot of Roxolana's.
I mean, it could be. I don't know, but I could see Gabriel's machinations behind it.
Well, I think the thing is, it's a real historical thing that happened, but we're definitely getting some hints here that Gabriel maybe helped nudge it along.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, should we dive in?
Yeah. So, chapter 19, Chios and Constantinople. This chapter is split into two main parts. The first part is Jared's final journey into Constantinople. He and Marta and Pierre Gilles finally make it there. He's very, very annoyed by the ichneumon, which I looked it up. It's actually a mongoose.
Yeah, not a wasp, which...
No, that's what came up first for me, too.
It's a wasp, but I'm like, that makes no sense.
But Herpestes ichneumon is actually the name of the mongoose. So he's got a little mongoose on his shoulder that's... I thought it was a cat for a while. Because they keep talking about like how it's an Egyptian mongoose. So they're talking about how the Egyptians revered these animals. So it's like, oh, it's a cat. But it didn't really sound like a cat. So
I assume that the real historical Pierre Gilles had a ichneumon named Herpestes because it's such a specific detail. And unlike Jared, I think it's adorable that he's got this buddy that travels around with him and like kills rats for him and whatever.
Yeah, me too.
So they sort of get to Constantinople right in the beginning of the chapter, but then rewind so we learn about the journey. Jared and Martha talk about the whole Lymond and Marta being brother and sister. And Marta, we learn actually, at least she's putting this on, she's not sure if she's a half sibling or a whole sibling, which I think is an interesting piece of information. I have some theories on that.
I have some theories on that too.
Jared is definitely drinking heavily again. And then he gets the crew to Chios, where Jared tracks the woman from the peppercorn. We find out that the child actually isn't with her, which I think we already knew anyway. And while he's on Chios, going to this woman's house, he gets jumped by 5 men in an alley and rescued by none other than Archie Abernathy. And they sort of confer and realize that they both have the same information, that Karadine is somewhere in Constantinople in the House of the Nightingales. And then Archie just gives Jared some other information, and we find out that Gabriel is on his way to Constantinople, or already there, as we find out later, under the guise of Jubril Pasha. So he's really gained power quickly in the Ottoman Empire. And that's that first bit of the chapter. Thoughts?
So there's a lot of little character bits I highlighted in here, like how Archie is sad that one of the partridges was killed when they were escaping the attackers at the brothel, which is very Archie. He's always thinking first about the animals.
He's so dear.
And then I think I wanted to ask you guys about and the other character thing I like is having Pierre Gilles give us the background on Constantinople, and it says to him Constantinople is more real than Istanbul because he's so interested in the history, and so it's going on and on and on about the stuff from much more ancient times when it was the Eastern Roman Empire. So I love how the chapter kind of kicks off with a lot of that history through his eyes, who's fascinated by it.
I would love to have a person like that as a tour guide anywhere I go.
I
know Jared is initially sort of annoyed by it, and we do find as he starts traveling with him more and more, he grows accustomed to it and actually sort of has a soft spot for Pierre Gilles. But like, just the wealth of information this man has about every place they pass and the historical, contextual, religious aspects of it. It's fascinating to me. And like, they mentioned that he was supposed to write this book, but lost all of his notes. Man, I wish that book really existed.
Yeah, that book does exist.
Does it?
I think it was one of her sources. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he did write the book eventually.
He wrote the book.
I believe so. Yes.
All right. I should look that up.
I also love the way that Pierre is sort of treats Jarrett like an employee.
I know.
There's an point where they part ways at the end of this where he's like, you know, I will send word to you so you can go. And Jarrett just kind of goes along with it. He's like, okay. You know?
I love that Jarrett goes along with it too.
Yeah, exactly. It's like he's like, whatever, okay. I mean, it goes back to what he was doing last time, where he was, you know, he was transcribing all this Latin for him, and it's like that was not his job, but he's just like, oh, okay, I can do it, so I will, you know.
I think Jared is a person who really needs a leader, and this guy swoops in and starts telling him what to do, and he just starts doing it.
Oh, yeah. Great! I have something to do now, other than just look for the child.
Yeah. Jared really needs external structure. Like he needs structure imposed upon him, and like orders about what to do. And I think he thrives in that situation. Like if he's got someone who's giving him like clear direction and is like knows his talents, knows his strengths, and you know enables him to sort of live and work from those strengths, then he's going to do really well. But he just needs someone to lay that out for him and be like, okay, this is what you're doing, X, Y, Z, Z, Z.
Yep. Yeah, and hopefully that person isn't actually an evil sociopath.
Right, is not a horrible person.
Yes,
yeah.
He needs to learn how to like pick the right leader, but then once he's got one, that is something probably healthy for him.
Such a good example of like an excellent follower, terrible leader.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, because we see him, like it's him and Marta, so he's kind of the leader, and he spends most of his time getting drunk. He's not a good leader.
Whereas if he just let her make all the decisions, like, probably would have been fine.
Yeah, maybe.
Depending
on what she's up to.
Yeah, right. Depending on what she's up to.
Yeah.
She's not off sending pigeons around.
Right. So then I wanted to ask you, so this is when they're talking about on 374, 375 about Marta being Lyman's sister. And she says, he's not going to question it. He's far too afraid. And Jarrett's like, afraid? And he's so like bewildered by that. He says, it's the oddest thing Martha had said so far. And it doesn't make any, sorry?
I said, I completely understand why he'd be afraid to ask.
So that's what I wanted to ask you guys. Why?
On Sibylla. Like he doesn't want his mother to be the person that sort of was unfaithful or.
Yeah, I don't think he's afraid. I completely agree. I think he's afraid of finding out what happened to his mother. And I think he's afraid of finding out about his own parentage. Like, I don't think he's necessarily afraid of finding out, like, because the automatic assumption is that Marta is his father's illegitimate child by some woman in France. Like, that would be the automatic assumption. I do not think that is what has happened at all. I think that is absolutely not what has happened. And I think Lymond also does not think that's what's happened and is afraid of finding out what really is going on with his mother. I think that the implication and the fact that it's even mentioned, I think this is the case, is that Lymond and Marta are full siblings.
That's what I think.
My guess is that they're full siblings from Sibylla and another man, the same man, and that Lymond's birth could be explained as legitimate because of Sibylla's circumstances. Like wherever she was living when Lymond was born, like it's automatically assumed that Lymond is the son of his father, but that wherever Marta was born, like his father hadn't been around. So if Sibylla was off on her own in France and had a baby, she can't bring that baby back as, here's my daughter and let's join the family. Like she can't do that. So does this other sibling get left with like a trustworthy person ish, but then Marta grows up? I don't know. That's a shot in the dark, but that's kind of what I think maybe happened.
I think we have very similar theories. I agree with you. I think Lymond and Marta are full siblings with Sibylla as the mother and some unknown. My question is whether or not they're twins and whether Sibylla somehow had to give up Marta for some reason that we don't just know anything about yet.
Oh, that is interesting.
Because they look so incredibly similar.
I like that. That is interesting.
And then I don't think Gavin is the father of either of them.
Absolutely.
Gavin is Richard's father. Gavin and Sibylla had Richard.
Yeah.
And then Sibylla and some unknown person had Lymond and Marta. And then we also have to remember that Lymond has another brother out there somewhere, because the Dame de Toutant said, you will never meet your brother again. And that it just can't be Richard. I refuse to accept that Lymond and Richard won't meet. So I'm thinking there's another brother out
about that.
Yeah.
I 100% forgot about that. Oh. What the hell?
To which I'd be interested to see if Lymond has met his brother at some point already.
Yeah.
She did say you won't meet your brother again. But I don't know. Are we right, Laura? Tell us now.
How did I get to you in?
No. That's right. So if he had, okay, so that makes me suspect that he has a brother who's dead, that he has met, because of her, like, you'll see Una again, but she saw her dead, and so I wonder, because she seems to have there's a little bit of a habit of talking about people in prophecy who are dead in ways that doesn't imply that they're dead. So I'm wondering if he has a brother that he's met before but is now dead.
Sure.
No longer with us.
But I'm also starting to wonder if the Dame really does have powers like that, because a lot of what she said that we took to be prophecy for Philippa was just her trying to maneuver her into getting into the Seraglio. So,
and also if she just knows the family story,
then
she can just say, like, yeah, you're never, like, because I feel like she knows all of this. So if she knows who the brother is, and she knows that he's either, like, I don't know, gone off to the wilds of South America or something, never to return, or is dead or something like that, then she can say those things as a prophecy.
You're right.
It's just her knowledge of what.
I mean, she did accurately predict Una being dead, although she spoke about it in sort of riddles. And then the only other thing that we've seen her do that could be supernatural was when she sort of read Jared's mind in this book and Lymond's mind in the second book. Sort of knew exactly what they were thinking at the moment. So I don't know. The jury's still out for me on whether the Dame de Toutant has actual powers or not, but I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll find out when we know more about this brother, or when we know more about Marta's actual parentage. But I agree with you. I think we're both on the same page about that.
Yeah. I just think it makes the story so much more interesting. And I feel like if I have a question about a plot point or a story point, I'm just going to fall in the, it's more interesting if it's this. So I'm going that way. So I think it's more interesting if they're full siblings and there's some, like, weird reason why Marta was raised separately. Also really sad. Oh.
I mean, the strange thing is, I mean, I guess this speaks to nature versus nurture, but if they were raised so far apart from each other, like, how do they have the same sort of philosophy and intelligence level, and, like, they just enjoy the same things and work almost on the same level as well? So
that kind of speaks to your twins thing, like,
true.
Maybe because twins do that are raised apart, often have, like, weirdly go into the same professions and stuff like that. So
I wonder if they've got twin sense.
Yeah, I think that was what I wanted to say about the sibling thing. Also, Jarrett just had there's just a few comments of Jarrett's, like, where he says, Marta, the cold and the treacherous, whom he wanted, and who was the sister to Francis Crawford of Lymond. And then later on in 75, it says, like, in spite of all that, he remained obsessed with her, and then he goes on to describe all of these things that are also true of Lymond.
I have
Okay.
one other thing I noticed. I apologize if you're hearing background noise. Jarrett has been thinking about Lymond in this, and he kind of goes through this whole thought process. First of all, I think it's interesting. It's on 381. He's thinking of Lymond as Francis over and over at the bottom, which I just like, because remember in Disorderly Nights when he was thinking of him the whole time, he would never think of him as Francis. He was distancing himself, and now, kind of despite himself, even though he's angry at him for his supposed whatever he thinks was happening, that is not what was happening. he's still thinking of him as Francis. He's still thinking of him as this friend. And he's thinking about him, and he has this thought, whose past actions he could not condone, whom he had promised never to leave. And this idea that time when, you know, Lymond asked him not to let him drive him away, Jared's remembering this as, I promised not to leave him. So I kind of love Jared, even though Jared's obviously a disaster of a human.
Yeah, I love him too.
Yeah, I underline that too. Just that at war and worst, he had to come face to face with Francis, and just that idea that like I think he's both dreading and longing to be reunited, and yeah, and then he says at the end of that little bit, he says, and about whom he knew something which he suspected for his very life he must appear not to know. So like, is he it's the secret, it's the sibling relationship that he knows. And okay, so I'm just like, he's kind of like, he's taking it so seriously, like he has to, like, on his very life he has to pretend not to know this, and I'm kind of like, really?
I'm pretty sure he's not going to kill you for it.
Right. And I think he kind of already knows. Like, but Jared is he's just so dramatic about everything, and often he's so dramatic about the wrong things. It's just so funny to me.
I think we see an instance here where Jared actually has some perception, because he instantly realizes, oh, Lymond already knows about this. It's like, I'm going to let on that I don't know anything about it, but like Lymond has figured this out. And like, you can kind of tell the second that he saw Marta for the first time, it immediately jumped into his head. And I think for once we see Jared figure that out in his head. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think it's also really telling that at the end, where Archie reveals that Gabriel Pasha is waiting for Lymond in Istanbul, Jared's reaction is, oh my God, Francis. So he's super worried about him, and he's been going back and forth, like, should I just leave? And he's obviously not going to leave. Now he knows Lymond's in danger. He still cares about the kids. Like, he wants to help, and there's like no doubt that he's going to rush him home.
Yeah.
Do you guys think Jared is super disappointed, I guess is the word, that he hasn't found the child? Because I have this feeling he feels personally responsible for losing the child in Mehedia, and he really wants to find Carradine and like show up in Constantinople and be like, look, Lymond, I found him for you.
Yeah. I think I think you're right. I think there's a desire. Like, I mean, just imagine being Jared and having, like, being able to present, like, I found this boy for you, you know, like that would super appeal to his both like heroic, you know, desire to be the hero and to be the one who saves the day, and to please Lymond and do something for him, like, and to rescue the kid, which clearly has a reaction to.
Yeah, and I think he also, like, when he found out there was 2 kids, he was like, the one I saw is the real one. He already has this attachment to that kid and this like protectiveness toward that kid.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next part of this chapter, we jump back to the Topkapi Palace in Philippa's point of view. So out of all of the courtesans that are there, I don't know if that was the right word, the harem women, Philippa sort of shows the most talent with music. So she specifically is chosen to play for Roxolana. So we show her and Kiaya Khatun going up to Roxolana's rooms. And throughout this chapter, we learn sort of all of the skills that Philippa has been learning. She learns how to do makeup on her face. She learns the proper way to care for her hair, and she's sort of blooming. There's this great sort of section, I forget what page it's on, where it just lists all the fruits that she's able to eat. And I got so hungry, and I like wanted to go down to the grocer and buy all of these fruits. Philippa gets this sort of lesson in seduction from Kiaya Khatun, because she really doesn't know any of those arts either. So this is like, I wrote the word upgraded, and I don't know why, but it's like Philippa's learning all of these life skills that she had no either desire or no way to learn living in Flaw Valleys.
I think it's interesting, like she dismisses all of these like seductive arts as unimportant or not necessary, and yet I think that she, through talking with Kiaya Katoom, like she sees like there is a practical element to all of this, you know, and like as women, like they don't have power in a lot of ways, but this is a way that they can, and we can as a woman, like throughout history, this is a way that women have been able to control or change their circumstances or benefit themselves or their family, or like, you know, like it's not a useless thing. And the fact that seduction skills or like these types of changing your appearance to be more appealing and things like that, like we often denigrate that and we sort of treat it as society as like that's something to be condemned or to be laughed at or reduced in value. And yet historically it was super important, and being skilled at those things was a valuable skill. And so from a practical standpoint, I think Philippa is always driven by what's practical. And yeah, I think it becomes more practical.
Yeah.
I absolutely love the part where Guzel kind of walks her through, if you do this, you know, here's what may happen, and she ends up with at the end, you may rule the whole Ottoman Empire. Like you can become one of the most powerful people in the world if you do this right.
Yeah.
She's
like
definitely maneuvering. Yeah, she's definitely maneuvering Philippa into a higher position of power within her current situation, almost as if she's like knowing that like, hey, things are about to go down here in Topkapi, and like the more you can be aware of things, the more you will be able to help your situation and Lymon's.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way that she's not aware of Gabriel's presence and like all of the. She's completely aware of his, you know, his evil intentions towards Philippa. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm looking forward to seeing how Kiaya Katoom manipulates the Seraglio situation, either for or against Gabriel or for or against Philippa. Like she seems to be pro Philippa and giving her tools. So
yeah, she's okay.
I'm not entirely sure where her loyalties lie, but I really don't think they're on the same side as Gabriel's at all. I think she's actively working against him here.
Yeah, I think so too. And I don't think that that's necessarily out of a sense of like I don't think she's being selflessly generous in this. I think there's some sort of motivation that supports her own power structure, her power base. And I kind of wonder if she sees, because her power base sort of flows from Dragut and his power base. So I wonder if she sees Gabriel as a threat to Dragut, which he probably is, in which case working against him would be in Kiaya's best interest. So
I actually really like, though, that even though her power base lies in Dragut, that we've seen her do all of these things without his presence at all in this book. Like he's not needed. I don't know if he's going to show up. I don't think he's going to show up in this book. So
I totally thought he was, and now I'm wondering. I think you're right. I don't know.
I think he's off fighting. Is he part of the war against the Persians at this point?
I have no clue. I totally thought he was in Constantinople before we got to Constantinople, and then he's nowhere to be found. I'm like, oh, he's not here.
I think if Dragut was around, then Gabriel wouldn't have been able to get to the position he's in so easily.
Oh.
Because I feel like even though they didn't really work together in the third book, and Dragut had that conversation with Lymond in the garden where he's sort of warning him against him. So I feel like the Dragut totally knows what's going on with Gabriel too. And if he was around, Gabriel probably wouldn't have been able to get as far up the ladder as he did. But I don't know.
Here's a question. Do you think Gabriel underestimates the power of women?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
So do you think that his, like Dragut being absent, that Kiaya Katoom being present is like he's dismissed Dragut's power base because he's not here, but his power base actually is here and is quite active? So,
I can totally see that. I don't think Gabriel spares a spare thought for
either. I think being
being able to rise to his level.
Yeah. So it would make me super happy, even though I know Lymond is like the hero of our book, sort of. It would make me super happy if Gabriel's downfall was the result of Roxolana, Katayatum, and Philippa. Like if the three of them were sort of the reason that Gabriel gets like destroyed, that would make me super happy.
Let's throw Marta in there for some extra.
Okay. Yeah.
I did also want to comment on, I think some of this reflects the era the book was written. Like Philippa is making a very strong feminist argument about women being equal to men, which reminds me of my mom, who was a women's liber when she was young. But I also think, like, I totally get Philippa's points here. Like she says a bunch of things like, all this femininity enhancing stuff, it's nothing to do with life or culture or accomplishments or self-respect. The effect on the girls doesn't matter. We're being turned out and polished like buttons for the Sultan's adornment. She talks about women running to seed, getting hypnotized by the mirror. She talks about all the beauty rituals, making them all look the same instead of preserving their differences. And I think Philippa completely has a point here, which is that if the world were fair, women wouldn't have to do all this stuff in order to gain power. Women would be able to stand on their own merits as equals, which she is quite insistent that she is equal with men. And I think a lot of young women, or at least me, went through this as a kid where you don't want to compromise to society's expectations because you want things to be fair, and you know that they should be more fair, and you shouldn't have to do it. You shouldn't have to make yourself pretty to men in order to be successful in the world. But then Kiaya Hatun comes at it with the just way more practical, like, you are not going to change the world. This is the world we're stuck in, and like you got to play the game in order to get ahead. Which I think is big. Oh, go ahead.
And she's like, and I'm going to teach you to play the game, so pay attention.
Yeah. Which is a big transformation for Philippa, and I think really interesting, like that balance between her knowing it's all kind of bullshit, but also like being able to play it when she needs to.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I went through a similar, not exactly the same, but I went through a sort of dismissal of all of this stuff with a slightly different motivation. It was just like, it felt false and artificial and like not honest and all of that. And then I came to the realization in like my mid 30s, I think, that was like, wait a second, this could also be art, and just like, this could be a performance that you put like as gender as performance, and gender as, like fashion as performance, and fashion as beautiful in art. And yeah, so it totally changed the way I dressed and everything.
Yeah.
Go figure. Patriarchy.
But I just love Philippa. Like, she knows she's in this place where she could literally be killed if she does the wrong thing, and she still just can't help, like, I'm not gonna let you pluck out my eyebrows.
Yeah. And yeah. It's a good scene.
Well, and I was gonna say, and it works. So she does end up kind of upgraded. She gets her own room. She gets to go to these educational classes that the boys are going to. And Kiaya Hatun hooks her up with Roxolana. So like you guys are saying, Guzel is helping make sure Philippa is successful in here. Why, we don't know.
Yeah. I also love that she realizes at one point, she says, like, Philippa did not enjoy having pointed out to her in that deep, even voice the undoubted faults of her posture and carriage, because one cannot clown one's way quite through everything. She learned to stand and to sit so that no one sang out something rude and nothing forced her to think out a reply. So it, like, you can see sort of her adjusting, like I love that line about one cannot clown one's way through everything. And so she's like, okay, I got to take some things seriously. And
yeah, and then we can see how it is changing her in ways that she's probably not even going to think about in the future, her posture and whatever else. There's a wonderful line on 391 where she's getting ready to play for Roxolana, and she has this thought, "Get it wrong now, dearie," said Philippa to dirty box, and they'll stitch your mouth shut and tip you into a jar. So it's like she's got these two identities. There's the Philippa underneath, and then there's this dirty Bach that she's like performing / maybe becoming.
Mm-hmm. There's also a line I thought was really, it's back on 385, but it's talking about Kiaya Khatun. It says, she received the novices her first lesson in Kiaya Khatun's golden, ironical voice on how to attract, to foster, to satisfy the peculiar cravings of a man. And the fact that Kiaya Khatun says this in an ironical voice, it's like, so what she says is not what she means, you know, and that like the irony is like what she's speaking is the opposite of what she's meaning. So she's teaching them how to attract, foster, and satisfy the particular cravings of a man. But what she actually means is how to establish your own power base. You know, like I think that's what Dunnett is saying there, and I really liked that. But yeah.
And I think it's really interesting also just in terms of like the historical novel of ways to integrate women into the story in ways that are historically accurate. Like they don't have to be like the warrior woman who fights with the men. This is very historically accurate for how a woman would establish her power base. Roxolana was completely real, and yet it's just as interesting, and there's just as much nuance and like it's stuff going on here as there is in the men's story.
Yeah, if not more, because this isn't a story that gets told very often. Like we don't know this story, and you know, I think whenever we hear a story about particularly a harem, it's always fetishized, and we always get this like story of, you know, women being kept, and like, you know, it's this incredibly fetishized version of what goes on. Same with it, you know, this, it's also sort of exoticized, and like is in Western literature, we have this exotification of Eastern culture, and it happens also with Japanese, like with the geisha culture in Japan. Like it's completely fetishized in Western literature. And so but we don't get the story, like we don't get the actual story of what really happened. And so obviously this is still far distant from the past, and so who knows how. Dunnett's sources were obviously really amazing, and I'm so curious about how accurate she was, but it seems really, it's just fascinating to.
Yeah. And those stories that are fetishized are almost exclusively told from the male point of view as well.
Yeah.
So to get this from a female writer, I think is really eye-opening for me, at least. This is a story I don't think I've ever seen before told, and it's been around since the 60s, and I just didn't know it was here. So.
No, it is funny, right? It's completely not fetishized at all, even though they're in the harem and they're all made all beautiful. It's so real, you know, the indignity of putting the stuff on your face and Philippa sneezing, like, and the other girls making fun of her. Like it feels completely real. It doesn't feel like a male fantasy at all.
Exactly. Like even all of the things which told from like a male gaze perspective would be all about like preparing the body of this young woman for, you know, blah, blah, blah. And yet here, yeah, it's like awkward and uncomfortable and annoying and all of that.
Yeah, she just keeps thinking how ridiculous it is and how she thinks they're all crazy and they think she's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I love the line where it says, so this idea of like appealing to the opposite sex and like romancing someone or seducing someone. Philippa says on the bottom of 385, like between human beings, it was an indignity. Between friends, it was an insult. Between a man and a woman as a means to promote love, it seemed to Philippa there would surely be nothing more childish and degrading than a planned and detailed exercise to provoke and allure. Just like, oh.
I get it.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's like, I feel like it's the same tension we live with now, and it makes perfect sense that, you know, it's the same thing back then.
Yeah, and I feel like you mentioned this earlier when you were talking about what happens here, but I also love this bit where Philippa is talking to one of the other girls, and Philippa gazed at her. She says, because the girl says, "You'll look like a different person." And Philippa says, gazed at her with the eyes of despair, "But I'm a different person now. All they're doing is making us all look the same." And that just reminds me of like teenagers, like high school teenagers. Like it's like we're all going to be different together and look exactly the same, you know. And that's today. It's happening today.
I mean, I think I literally made the same argument when I was a teenager. When I was a teenager, I refused to wear makeup. I refused to wear tight clothes. Like, I thought the whole thing was just like the performance of gender was bullshit. It was fake. But then you can't get ahead in the world like that. So you have to play the game if you want to be successful.
Yeah.
Or maybe you can, but I couldn't figure out how.
Yeah.
Shall we jump to the next chapter? All right, this is a big one. Chapter 20, Topkapi. So in the first section of this chapter, Lymond and Diaramon, the former ambassador, are sort of getting prepared to their Tuesday meeting with the Sultan. There's a lot of pageantry going on, a lot of sort of describing how they're dressed and what the sort of ceremony is going to be. Ziswitz is really helping them prepare for all of this. There's an excellent map of Constantinople. The word, however you say it, Constantinople on page 396, which I found really interesting because this is the first time.
So tiny. I was like, I wanted it to be like 4 times as big.
It's the first time there's been like a second map in any of these books, that at least in these versions. And there's a really great part that sort of goes back and explains how Lymond is able to sort of help tune the spinet. So we see him actually enjoying music, and he's actually doing something else. But when you first read this part, I didn't pick up on that at all. So
I did. I was like, they're sending a really big object into the Sultancy. I was like, what is he hiding in there? Yeah.
But like, he gets to sort of let his guard down, and like, he's doing this for a reason, but he's also really enjoying music, which is something I don't think we've seen since the second book.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I do have, can we jump back for 1 second? Because
yeah.
I wasn't at the last page when we switched to the next chapter. At the very end of the previous chapter, Kaya Khatun says, I suggest you restrict your use of the personal pronoun, meaning I, the word I. Misunderstandings occur. And in Topkapi, the sentences are irreversible. And so I just wanted to throw out, like, why do you think she's telling Philippa, stop saying I?
I think because it would bring attention to herself. I think the way that these women are treated is that they're sort of this like group, this herd, you know, and that like individuality is not sort of something that is I can't think of words today. I don't know why.
Yeah, rewarded.
Yeah, it's rewarded, or it almost might be punished. It's like, you don't have the individual power to stand up. Like, you're a group. So
and she doesn't have rights.
Yeah.
Like, she doesn't have the right to say, give me this, I want this, you know. Or
I also wasn't sure if the personal pronoun referred to here was the I or the he, because she also uses he, referring to the baby. But it could also be like, you belong to the Sultan. You're not allowed to talk in a familiar way with a male, even though you're referring to a child. It could be misunderstood.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Like, you have to call him by his name instead of the generic he, because then it could be, if someone misunderstands and thinks she's talking about someone else. Oh, I bet you're right. I totally read that wrong. Yeah, I bet you're right. I bet she shouldn't say the word he. She should use his name.
Yeah, presumably if
if somebody overhears her saying something about he in a bath, like, yeah, that would be bad. Yeah, you're right. Okay. Thanks.
It's scary, right? The sentence is irreversible.
Yeah.
So then at the end of that very first section, they've made it all the way up into the palace, and they are greeted by none other than Gabriel. He's back. Yay.
Blah.
You can see how excited I am.
He's so scary here.
He's terrifying in this chapter.
Yeah.
So I highlighted a few things. One is Gautier thinking about Marta. He wondered again furiously where that fool of a girl had got to. So I feel like that's very telling, because she's missing. She's taken longer than expected to get there. She could be dead. Something terrible could have happened to her. If he cared about her, he'd be worried about her, but he's not worried about her. He's just angry at her for not being there, which tells us again what a awful man Gautier is, and how like awful Marta's life must have been, that like she, even this man who's supposedly her uncle, doesn't care about her. And then just a cool historical note here, 395 at the bottom. It refers to the half-finished building of Sultan Suleiman himself, which is the Suleimani Mosque, which I'll show you a picture of because it's this gorgeous mosque now in Istanbul that is like a huge tourist attraction. It's really huge, and it's just cool. Like, I like how she knows the history, so that this mosque, which is like a top tourist attraction, was under construction at the time of the story. Here you go, you can see it.
Oh wow.
Mm.
And then like the inside is just gorgeous.
Oh, nice.
And isn't it really close to Hagia Sophia as well?
Yeah, it's right by it.
Okay.
They're all really close to each other. Anyway, just wanted to share that. We went there on the Dunnett tour.
Oh, I'm so jealous.
One day we'll all go.
I want to go.
Because so much of these chapters takes place in the Topkapi Palace, I actually spent a lot of time this week sort of looking at maps and reading up on the history. I normally don't do that with these books because I really don't want to learn something that may be a spoiler. I didn't really learn any of that. But I was trying to find, like, if they have, since the pandemic, some sort of online virtual tour, but I was not able to do that. So, because there are a lot of like museums that are offering virtual tours for free right now. I did not find one for the Topkapi Palace. But your pictures last week also really helped sort of my search. So
beautiful.
Oh, it's exquisite.
Yeah, it was the second time I went there was in the spring, and it was so warm, and there was tulips everywhere, and it was just like, we just like spent the whole day there because it was so nice.
I could easily do that.
And at the I forgot to mention, at the Dunnett tour, we had a dinner at one of the outer courtyards. So we actually like ate in Topkapi.
Yeah, one of the corners has a restaurant. I saw that on the maps. So I was like, okay.
Yeah, so cool.
Have sherbet?
So the sherbet they have isn't frozen. It's
drink, right?
It's just like, it's a drink. It's like a really syrupy drink. It's way too sweet for me.
Mm.
But it has cool flavors like rose and pomegranate and stuff. But like it sounds great in theory, but then like I literally couldn't drink more than like a teaspoonful. It's like medicine. It's so syrupy. I loved there had been an argument with the man Zitwit about perfume, in which Lymond acidly had capitulated. It's like he knows he's gonna lose in that one. What else? Yeah, I think I thought one of the most interesting things in this was what you already mentioned, which was that Lymond was enjoying tuning the spinet, and that afterward he was more communicative and relaxed than at any point in the past months. And he actually, not only does he tune it, but he plays it, and everyone hears this beautiful, beautiful music that they've never heard like this quality before there. And it's, I feel like, a reminder that he's so good at it. Like, his soul is in the music, and like Gautier has a thought. Gautier wonders what change of balance had created the need for it now. And so I'm curious, why do you guys think that after all this time of being so resistant, he actually like gives into it and plays it and comes out more relaxed and communicative than ever?
I think it might be a side effect of the opium that he has been being dosed with. I think he's totally let his guard down, that, you know, if he wasn't being drugged at the moment, spoiler alert, that we find that out later, I would have stopped himself from doing this. So
it could also be that he has an excuse. Like he has to tune the spinet, so he has an excuse. And once he starts to play, you have to play it to tune it. And so once he starts to play, he just gets lost in it. And then there's a healing, there's a healing element to music, in that he's able to connect with that part of his soul, if you will, through playing. So yeah, it could just be that he was able to let go in that moment.
I think it's both those things, and I think it's also he doesn't have any idea that Gabriel's still alive at this point, and he's in a very strong position as far as he knows. It's very likely that his petition will be granted as far as he knows. So I wonder if he's also the combination of the drug kind of letting down his defenses, and then the optimism that we're almost there, we're going to get the kids out, is maybe making him kind of give in, more likely to give in to actually having a positive thought.
Good point. Yeah. Yeah, I forgot that he thinks Gabriel's dead at this point.
Yeah.
I love how she sets it up so everybody else knows except Lymond.
Which is surprising, like that he's the one person that doesn't know that this is coming. So, because he's usually so on top of things.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't have
I'm
all
surprised that he was willing to admit that Gabriel would die so easily. So
he doesn't have all his sources telling him that Gabriel's still alive, right? And he believed Jared.
I'll never make that mistake again.
Not believe Jared.
Also, I think Dunnett is sort of she's playing a game with genre in a way, or with character, where Gabriel's kind of like the devil at this point. Like, he's superhuman. There's no way he could know all the things he knows and survive all the things he survived. So, like, in some ways, he should have been dead, but because he's the devil, he lived.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. So then we flip to Philippa's point of view. She has been playing music for Roxolana occasionally, and Roxolana takes her aside and brings her up to this tower where Philippa almost immediately realizes, oh, this is probably someplace she shouldn't be. So this tower is sort of a little spy. It's got a window, a spy hole into this court. And so Philippa is there and able to watch the moment that Gabriel reveals himself to Lymond. And I love that we're getting this momentous reunion from an outsider's point of view, from neither Lymond or Gabriel. So Gabriel and Lymond have just this sort of biting yet very nice interchange, because they're so caught up in ceremony here. They really can't do anything to change the outcome that happens. And of course, Gabriel is telling him sort of there's no way that he's going to get what he came here for. He brings Kuzukoyim into the room, sort of just to show Lymond, like, I still have power over you. I still have one of these children. And like, you don't know which one this is yet, even though we do. Lymond instantly tries to buy.
Do we? We don't know.
We don't know for sure, but I think it's pretty telling that this is Gabriel's child and that Carradine is Lymond's child. I mean, it could still be switched, but I'm beginning to, that's the way it's written, or that sort of Dunnett wants us to believe. So you're right, maybe it could be completely opposite, but
I'm suspicious that we don't know. I agree with you. I think we're supposed to think this is Gabriel's child and the other one is Lymond's child, but Dunnett, she's played us before.
Yes. I wouldn't be surprised at all if it's not that way, but we'll see. Yeah, and I wrote something that I have no idea what I wrote. My handwriting is terrible. Roxolana tells Philippa that K is that the Carradine or Kuzukoyim is Gabriel's son. So Roxolana knows at this point, and she tells Philippa, oh yeah, that's Gabriel's son, by the way. So yeah.
I found it heartbreaking when Gabriel reveals himself and Lymond's what Lymond says is, life is full of small disappointments. And it was just like, oh, it's so heartbreaking. Like just the irony of that statement. And
the palpable tension between these two men in this moment.
Yeah.
I do love the whole way that the whole thing is set up as a diplomatic ceremony. So they have to, on the surface, behave in this diplomatic, ritualistic way, even as they're threatening each other, and they hate each other so much. And the opening line that Gabriel says, which is so creepy, he says, May thy days in this city pass swiftly, as with a whip of light the angel driveth the clouds from the heavens. May thy sojourn here endure forever, and thy life seem to thee long. And even Roxolana is like, what?
I mean, it's
Of course,
just
he's the angel, like driving the whip. I mean, Gabriel.
And may thy life seem to thee long. Like, may you just, die horribly in suffering that, feels long.
It's like, I've kept you alive up to this point, but now that you are in my city, I'm going to kill you. This is where your end comes. And it's not going to be here, because even I don't have the power to kill you right here. But like, as soon as you leave the grounds of the palace, your life is mine. It's terrifying. And like, Lymond knows it as well, so.
I also love that Lymond comes this close to just killing him. Like,
Absolutely.
this close. Like, if Daramon hadn't spoken up at the right moment, like, Lymond would have just done it, and then he would have died, the kids would have died, like.
Philippa would have died, yeah.
Yeah.
He would put everybody's lives in forfeit.
But I think it's really telling. One, it's like the effect of the drug, but two, there is this real tension between what's more important, killing Gabriel or saving the children.
Mm-hmm.
I want to share a picture of the secret window, because you can actually see this when you go to Top Copy, which looks down on the hall of the divan. So these are my pictures. I think this is the entry to the hall. This is another angle on it. And then once you get inside, here's the thing.
Oh.
I took like a bunch of pictures of it, obviously.
Mm.
But it's like just this little window up here. And then, it says like, this was how the Sultan spied and listened in on things. And that sort of Dunnett mentions that, right? That Roxolana is not supposed to be in here. This is the Sultan's secret listening room.
Does Lymond know that Philippa's in the room? Or does he just know that Roxolana's there?
I don't think he could know for sure.
Yeah, I don't think he's had any inside information of how Philippa has been treated inside the palace or what level she's risen to yet. So I agree with you. I don't think he would know that Philippa specifically is there. Except there was a thing about him looking at the window, especially when Philippa got close and like spread scent around. So I was wondering if there was some way like he knows that that's Philippa's scent. But then she's been, she's had all these different things done to her since she's been in the palace that I don't think that's possible either.
Well, and it's Roxolana's scarf or whatever. So I think what Philippa is doing is she wants Lymond to know that Roxolana is in there. And it works. Lymond realizes that Roxolana's in there, because who else could it be? Like, it's either Suleiman or Roxolana, and it's not Suleiman because he's waiting for them. I think he doesn't have any way of knowing for sure that it's Philippa, but he does figure out that it's Roxolana, and then he tailors what he says, because he and Gabriel have this whole exchange about, Roxolana, don't cast any doubt on Roxolana, she's pure or whatever, specifically because he knows she's listening and he wants her on his side.
What do you guys think was at the bottom of 407, like in the middle of all of this? So we get this like, all honor is due to Corium Sultan, So then we get this bit where it says she's intently, all her attention was focused on these two men, and of the two, she was intent chiefly on Gabriel. Philippa's talking about Roxolana. Mm-hmm. Philippa recalled something else. There had been a visitor yesterday to Corium's apartments, a man, for she had aided her mistress to veil, holding the diamond-set mirror in pale and dark jade, and placing ready the sherbet and kava. Then she'd been dismissed, leaving only the mutes and Roxolana's personal eunuch. And it says Gabriel's golden voice. So are we supposed to assume that Gabriel visited Roxolana? Which seems like, really? He's allowed to do that? Or someone else?
I think she would have known if it was Gabriel, right?
That's what I thought. Yeah.
I mean, the fact that any man is allowed to visit Roxolana other than the Sultan, and that's not a eunuch.
Yeah. So like there's a man who shows up And we get the information about this visit from this man, like in the middle of this scene with Gabriel and Lymond. And so I'm like, who's this guy who it seemed unlikely that it was Gabriel? So I'm like, okay, so we have random man inserted into this story.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I think we need to look at the context. What are Lymond and Gabriel talking about? Lymond says, I've heard another rumor, which I shall not relate to you or to any other man, in which if I hear it repeated, I shall stamp in the dust, for I do not believe it, and nothing will bring me to believe it. You would do well, instead of listening to evil, to defend the innocent against the hidden frothings of malice. Above all women, honor is due to harem sultan. So what are they actually talking about here?
The rebellion rumor, right? Of the sun rebelling and that Roxolana is somehow responsible for that whole thing.
Right, that Roxolana set up Suleiman to kill his own son so that her son could be powerful and she could preserve her power. Which of course he's not going to say, but that's the implication.
Right.
They're also talking about Rustam Pasha, who is the Grand Vizier, I believe, the one who should be in power, and Gabriel is his sort of second in command, but he's off fighting the Persians.
So we think Philippa's memory of this guy visiting Roxolana is related to the rebellion / manipulate the Sultan plan. Okay. That makes sense.
I also want to highlight Gabriel's continued creepy sexual comments to Lymond. 407. It is long since the elders received an ambassador young, ambitious, fragrant as a parcel of musk in red silk. Even those of pure disposition and right belief may covet thee. Just gross. Like he's creeping sexually on Lymond and on the two children.
Mm-hmm. Gross. And Philippa with that whole like, I'm going to found my harem with her business. Ugh.
Which also implies that he set up her to go into the Seraglio so that she would be more appealing for him to take advantage of sexually.
I don't know if I believe that. I think he's just using the information he has to throw in Lymond's face. So, but you never know.
What do you guys make of Lymond's reaction to seeing this child for the first time? This is the first of them that he's seen.
It's true.
Yeah.
We're told he goes very still.
He's frozen.
Yeah, he freezes, and then he asks the child its name.
Especially since he has to watch this child like bow down at the font of Gabriel and like kiss his feet and shower him with attention. Ugh, that would make me snap right then and there.
I feel like all of this is why we can see that Lymond just almost gets to the point where he just like kills Gabriel. This is too much. This guy has to be stopped.
Well, and the thing that's so sad is like the thing that this little kid says is like, where did Philippa go? You know, like that's all he can, like he's so scared and he doesn't know what's happening and he doesn't know what's going on. And he's just like, where's Philippa? And she's listening to that, of course. And
I love how she has to put her hands over her mouth because she knows it's death if she makes any noise up there. But it's so hard to stop the reaction of just trying to help the kid and cough at a kid and tell him it's okay.
It makes it seem like her and Kazukoyam have been separated for a while now. Like maybe they haven't seen each other for a day or two.
Yeah, it seems like they're not seeing each other as much. And then Roxolana is advising her to avoid him because the more he's coddled in childhood, the harder it'll be to adjust to the difficult life he's going to live.
How long? I don't know if they give an explicit answer to this. How long now has Gabriel been in the palace? Did he just arrive? Has he been there for a couple days, a couple weeks? Because, you know, I don't think Philippa would have any cause to see him, but you'd figure if he's been there a couple weeks, she would have ran into him at least a few times by now.
No, he would never be in the harem. They were completely separate. The women were isolated.
Yeah, even when you go to Top Copy now, the harem is totally separate part of it, and it's kind of a big thing that her visiting Roxolana is the first time she's allowed to go out of the harem.
Yeah, the only men allowed in the harem were castrated, were eunuchs.
Sure.
So she would never see Gabriel. Yeah.
But Kuzakoyim would have, and you would think he would have said something about it, possibly. So I'm wondering
little kid
if he sort of just shown up. It's like, hey, this new guy's here. It's my daddy. Unless he just doesn't know that at all.
He wouldn't know.
Yeah, he wouldn't know. And also, he probably wouldn't have seen him either. He's a toddler. Like, he wouldn't be running around the palace.
No, but I mean, I don't think if Gabriel had been there for a while, he would just, I don't know.
I don't think Gabriel cares at all about his kid. Like, I highly doubt he's not going to go visit him. He's not going to go see him. All he cares about is that he exists as a tool, as a pawn.
Exactly.
He's not going to go. So this little kid is in the harem. He's totally isolated. I highly doubt. I think this moment that we just saw is the first time that this kid has seen either Gabriel or Lymond.
Yeah.
Like,
but I'm still interested to know how long Gabriel's been around here. So.
Yeah, I think it's ambiguous at this point, but it could be quite a while because it's been a long time since Suara. And Lymond's been traveling for a long time, and the rumor had time to reach Archie that Gabriel Pasha was in Istanbul. So with enough time for those rumors to go around, it's probably been at least a few weeks, if not more.
Yeah, for sure.
I wonder if Guzel knew that he was around.
I feel like Guzel knows everything.
Yeah,
I know.
Yeah, she would know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right. I think she and Roxolana know.
Yeah. All right. Moving on. So this is when Gabriel sort of threatens Lymond with his death in Constantinople. He tells Lymond that he will allow Lymond to find the other child before he kills him. So he's sort of giving him that at least, but he's definitely going to kill him at some point in Constantinople. He threatens both of the children again and Philippa, and sort of this is the moment where Lymond almost kills him before they sort of walk on to talk with the Sultan finally. So that happens. The Lymond and Diarmid walk into the meeting with the Sultan. They bring the spinet. They shower him with all of these gifts. And then Lymond gives his petition onto whether he can bring Philippa and the child out. Of course, the Sultan says no. And Lymond sort of throws this new plan into effect where he says, but you were wrong. I'm not seeking this child because I think he's mine. I'm seeking him because I think that he is the son of King Henri of France and the son of Lady Jenny. Oh, God.
Coming back into the story.
Yes. So he sort of throws doubt upon that. And then he also tries to offer Roxolana this sort of casket of diamonds as well as a gift to see how she will react. So the Sultan basically says, if you can prove that either this is the king's son in his writing, or that this at least isn't Gabriel's son, then we shall give you what you seek. So.
Which is basically a no. Suleiman flat out says, I don't believe you. I don't take your word as the word of France. Even though he is the French ambassador, his word is supposed to represent France. Suleiman sees through him and seems to be pretty sure that he's lying, which he is. And it's kind of a desperate ploy on Lymond's part, honestly. It's really unlikely to work.
Hail Mary.
Yeah.
And really damning and damaging to the relationship between France and Turkey at this point.
Yeah, I think, and you can see why Diarmid is so pissed and so disappointed, because he first Diarmid was like, wow, he's doing so great, I'm really proud, and now he's like, what the hell?
How dare you?
Yeah.
I mean, it's clear that Lymond's priorities in these moments are the kids in Philippa, not France. So
Right.
like he doesn't care what happens to France, and of course Diamond does care what happens to France. So they are.
I mean, to be fair, like I think Lymond is right. Like he is saying like, listen, I'm just gonna resign, and it won't be held against France. It'll just be held against me.
Mm-hmm.
Not even French, so yeah.
Um,
One of the shortest stints as ambassador ever. What, Lymond lasted a week, if that?
Yeah, something like that.
But I like it's so clear. He really doesn't care about France. He's here for the children.
Well, and his loyalties never were to France. No, if anything, if any nation he's loyal to, it's going to be Scotland first. So
Yeah.
There's a bit in the beginning here when it's describing the meal. It's this and that to be followed in turn by kids' flesh with dressed rice and sauces. And I feel like she put that in there intentionally. Obviously, it means kids, as in like baby goats, whatever. But it's also, I think, intended to remind us of the fact that it's these innocent children that are at stake here.
the two lives that lie in the balance.
So again, like the previous section, I really enjoy the fact that they have to couch the whole thing in these diplomatic terms and have these like soft, gentle conversations that sound diplomatic to the people that are listening, even though what they're really saying is stuff like, I have prepared for you a detailed and exquisite death, it is a matter of deep regret that I cannot kill you at this moment.
Yeah, I underline that too. It's like Lymond says gently, it's a matter of deep regret. I cannot kill you in this moment. Like,
also, go ahead.
I was just saying, I like this bit where Lymond says, he replies to Gabriel by saying, you spoke of threats, you've indulged in a great many. I prefer to make promises. I'm going to take the girl and both children safely from you, whatever the outcome of my petition today. And then he goes on and says, when I have done that, I shall allow nothing to stop me until you are dead. For that is the difference between us. Like Francis Crawford, there is no price I will not pay after that. So, like you have threatened, and I am promising.
I think also when we're wondering which kid is which, Gabriel does make a reference on 411 that you may find the other child resembles you more than this one.
But do we believe that? Like, I mean, I think yes. I think that we're probably correct that the one in the harem is Gabriel's and the one in the Nightingale dealer's place is Lymond's. But I also feel like there's enough like unreliable narrator situation stuff going on here that like, is Gabriel lying?
He also says, I just saw it. Where did it go? Sorry, I'll find it. You guys keep talking.
Well, I was going to mention this is also where we have the thing about how valuable Gabriel is to the Ottoman Empire because of everything he knows. And so he's basically saying, they've been courting me for so long. Now that they have me, do you think they will risk alienating my loyalty? So he's basically like, I can do anything. I can torture these kids to death and I can get away with it because they want the info that I have, which just makes them extra horrible and extra scary. And then, go ahead.
No, yeah.
And then I was going to mention, because I missed this like the first 8 times I read it or whatever, Gabriel has them brought cloaks before they go into Suleiman. Mm-hmm. And it was a cloak of miniver lined with white brocaded silk. And there's a whole thing about it, by whatever delicate coincidence is what it says. And then right after that is when Lymond has this flashback of Algiers and the burning and the death of Una. And the reason why Lymond specifically has this flashback at this moment is the cloak of miniver, which is the same as the cloak he was wearing when he found Una's body and put over her body. If you go way back, there's a reference on page 79 but before leaving, Francis had cast about Una O'Dwyer's shoulders in the darkness his white and miniver cloak. So I don't know how like Gabriel had spies watching and they reported back to him what cloak Lymond was wearing.
Unless it's just a complete coincidence.
Oh no, it's no coincidence. Gabriel did it on purpose.
Yeah, it speaks to the superhuman nature of Gabriel as villain. So, like, that's a ridiculous detail that he shouldn't know, but he does.
But he does.
Unless he's got a spy working.
Yeah, I mean he's got a million spies, and then he kills them once they become, dangerous to him.
But one that works very closely with Lymond. I wonder. Yeah, we'll get to that at the end of the chapter. But I found that quote I was looking for, and it's just a small line, but he says, "We have the boy as you see, whether he is mine or yours, I do not know, nor does it interest me." So again, that's throwing doubt on whether which child is which. I don't know if we ever will have an exact answer, so we'll see.
Who knows?
Which is which?
I also have
If one ends up with strawberry blonde hair and the other one ends up with blonde hair, I think we'll know. Like,
yeah, I mean, as they get older, there's the idea that
they're gonna find out. But like at this point in the story, I don't think we can know.
No. You'll definitely be able to tell once they're like 6 or 7.
Surely.
Hopefully they both live that long. Please.
Please don't end this book with dead children. Crying out to Dorothy Dunnett from her future.
I have pictures of Roxolana and Suleiman that would be fun to share, I think, since we meet both of them in this section. Here is Roxolana. And here is Suleiman.
Oh, that is a hat.
Yeah.
I like how when Philip was looking down on the reception, she's like looking at all the different hats. I'm like, wow, there's so many different kinds of hats. And here's another Roxolana. I think like as desperate as the Jenny Fleming thing is, it's not terrible as a plan. I mean, it's obviously a Hail Mary, but the idea that it's the child of Henri of France is insane. But then when you think, oh, but he did really have an affair with Jenny Fleming, and Lymond really does know her and is her neighbor, so Lymond could be searching for the child. Like, he could be involved because she's a Scotswoman. Like, it's sort of like, plausible, right?
I mean, yeah, the idea that there's like, I think it also, one thing that makes it plausible is the lack of value on bastard children. Like, why would all these people be wandering around the Mediterranean searching for these toddlers if they weren't super important toddlers, Right. Whereas, the son of, like, the bastard son of a second son of a Scottish lord is not really that important in the grand scheme of things. So it makes sense that the kid is a more important kid than they thought he was. So that does make it a little more plausible.
And it also would make sense why he hasn't been telling people all along that it's the king's son, because letting that information out,
right, would make the kid more vulnerable. Yeah, so it's a shakily plausible Hail Mary.
It's a last-ditch effort to keep the option open.
But I mean, points for effort. Like, yeah. Good job for trying.
And like, I wonder if he just kind of came up with that off the cuff, or if that was always an option if the Sultan said no.
No, it had. I mean, I bet he came up with it off the cuff because he didn't know Gabriel was there. Like, there's no reason for him to assume that his petition would fail if there wasn't someone actively preventing the petition from failing.
Mm-hmm.
I sort of imagine he had like maybe brainstormed about like backup plans. And so maybe it was something he brainstormed about, but hadn't actually thought he was going to have to use.
That's true.
He's like, what's the most extreme backup plan I can throw into effect now? The one that has the best chance of working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's super strategic in his thinking, so that makes sense.
I feel like when we read Game of Kings, we were talking about how he always has like a plan and then a plan behind that and then like another plan behind that.
It's true.
So he is denied and he leaves the palace empty-handed. Even he had all of those beautiful diamonds, and he doesn't even have those anymore. Although he will soon again.
Is given up.
I wonder if he was, if Dunnett is suggesting that one of those diamonds is that very famous diamond they have in the Topkapi Palace. Like, I forget what it's called, but there's like this famous diamond they have in the jewelry treasury there on display.
I don't think so, because they give them all back to Lymond.
So well, for now. I don't know. Anyhow, shall we do the next chapter? Chapter 21, Constantinople, the Meta. So we start off with Ahriman being very angry at Lymond for the lie that he told to the Sultan. Of course, Lymond immediately says, yeah, well, I'm not going to be the ambassador anymore, so don't worry about that. Gabriel has already started killing some of the men at the embassy. When they return, some of the porters have already sort of been dismembered and like put on the walls, which is a horrifying image. While they're at the embassy, all of these accidents keep happening. So obviously the pressure is being put on Lymond there at the embassy. Roxolana ends up returning the diamonds along with a note that has a 6-pointed star, the Star of David, on it. And we find out that the Sultan is leaving to take the army south, which would effectively put Gabriel in charge. Lymond resigns, and then Gautier is summoned to fix the spinet. We find out that there's a problem with it. Lymond admits to having purposely mistuned one of the keys. So he wants Gautier to go into the palace to give a message to Philippa. Gautier says no, and Lymond threatens him up to the point of actually stabbing him in the shoulder. And then Lymond sort of disappears without a trace overnight. He ends up leaving the embassy.
And we don't know what Gautier is going to do.
No. Except he's probably not going to end up going to the palace because he just doesn't care. That's not his thing.
What did you guys think about Lymond stabbing this guy?
I mean, he's desperate.
Extreme.
He's not thinking clearly because he's been drugged for months. He's up against a wall. Like, he's lost his power structure and he stabs him.
I think also at this point, he probably still thinks Gautier is the traitor.
Yeah.
So I really like how this chapter opens with this day they left the supply port to the measure of the Coria Machiaborium, the dance macabre, the dance of General de los Muertos. They stepped from the high throne of Suleiman the Magnificent and under the dark aegis of Gabriel. So this whole idea that they are like, they've walked out of the light and into the darkness and death is stalking them under this like, you know, dark energy of Gabriel. Like, again, he's like the devil. He's like the representative of death stalking them all. Again, more of the superhuman, scary villain stuff.
And he's sending death in all these unexpected and terrifying ways into the embassy. Just like poison and robbers and drownings and
sending rotten food, sending poison food. The messengers that are trying to bring the food to the embassy end up dying. So,
and Lymond's getting the blame because to the people of the embassy, he's the new person there, and suddenly everybody's dying, so it must be his fault.
This is all part of Gabriel's promise that he will meet his end in Constantinople. So
keeping his promises.
But still keeping him alive because he said he's going to allow him to find the child first. So,
well, not only that, but this opium thing needs to pay off. Like, he needs to suffer and suffer and suffer. The other thing with the like we get this mention of the diamonds and how incredibly much they're worth, and so the whole idea of the diamonds as this backup plan, like even if Suleiman doesn't want to give Lymond the children, it gives him like an excuse where he could have Roxolana do it because she wants the diamonds, but you know, we find out even that doesn't work. Also, like how they call these the unholy incidents. Again, it's just this Gabriel as the devil, because we kept having Gabriel as like an angel, Gabriel as a light, Gabriel as holy, and now Gabriel is this unholy angel of death.
I mean, that's so typical, right? That's the personification of Satan. He is the morning star. He's the beautiful. He's the most beautiful of all the angels, and becomes the darkest. And that whole trope of beauty that is toxic and something beautiful and glorious corrupted.
There's a bit, so I think like if you look back, you can start to see all the little hints about Lymond's addiction, and there's a bit on 425 where it says he had little patience these days with trivia. He'd thrown his coat on the floor, or his cloak on the floor, and then he's kicking the cloak and moving around restlessly. And like Lymond throwing a cloak on the floor is like the most un-Lymond-like thing ever, unless he's playing Touty Boy. So again, this whole idea that he's like stopped with the kind of personal care and the meticulousness that's always been so important to him, is part of what's telling us about this addiction. And then also, if you think back to the previous chapters we read last time, where he had that injury and he says it only hurt at intervals. It hurt at intervals because he was being dosed with opium, so it didn't hurt when he had the opium.
Yeah, and there's been moments even before that, chapters before that, where it's like his eyes were clouded or his expression was vague or blank or something. Like there were moments where it's like, what the hell? And yeah,
there was a bunch where he was no longer taking as much care as he had to keep the people on the ship happy, where he'd always have this balance of like working them really hard but keeping them happy so they wouldn't revolt, and then he sort of slipped on that.
How long has he been being dosed? Has it been for the whole book, or is it only since Salablanca died and Onofrian sort of helped him?
No, I think it's been happening for months. It's been happening, I think it's been happening since they left France.
I mean, that's how long Onofrian has been with him.
Not that long. That might be.
Because there was a time he was separated from Onofrian and he didn't have withdrawal symptoms.
Right.
I think it started when he kills Gabriel. I think it's after Zuara.
I thought it started before their whole time with Kiaya Khatum, because there's definite references when they're stuck with her that he's out of it. Like that's when I first suspected that he was being drugged, was after the whole Agamarat, or during the whole Agamarat Kiaya Khatum section. There was multiple references to him like having his eyes glazed over and stuff like that.
I'm not sure how much of that was drugs though, and how much was he was just super traumatized by the experience with the Agamarat. Because also he was sleeping over with the Agamarat and he wasn't coming back all the time, so I don't know if he was eating the food consistently. But even if it was after that, it's still been months since that. It's still been happening for months.
Yeah. I mean, Zuara was months ago at this point, so
months.
It's an interesting reread game to go reread it and try to figure out when it starts.
I mean, kudos to you, D, for being the first one to be suspicious of Onofrian, because I think at this point,
I was like, why was he there?
He's the one that's preparing the food.
Yeah, the entire time I've been suspicious of him since he joined their train, like before Lyon. It's like, why is this guy here? And it just seemed so, I don't know, like his stated desire and reason for being with them did not seem sufficient for the amount of trouble that he's going through to do this. And I will confess, like, I was thrown off when he saved Lymond a couple of chapters ago from the assassins. But I think you guys are right that he probably killed Suleiman, or had Suleiman killed.
Salablanca.
I mean, sorry.
That would be a twist.
My brain. Salablanca in that section, and he wasn't under orders to kill Lymond, so.
Well, and we know specifically now that Gabriel has said many times, like, I've been keeping you alive. So that whole assassination attempt, I think the ultimate goal of that was to get Salablanca out of the way.
way. Yeah.
Because it lets an operator get much closer to him without someone who might catch
Which
him.
is exactly what he does on the boat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Super suspicious.
Mm-hmm. Little bastard.
There's a bit in this chapter that I really liked, which is just the character detail on Daramon. He's such a minor character, but I actually really like him. And he's coming to like basically try to get Lymond to leave because all these people are dying because of him. And then Lymond says that the attacks are being done to force me to leave. And basically, like once he leaves, Gabriel can do whatever he wants to him once he's no longer the ambassador. And Diaramon says, then you must stay. Mm-hmm. So like even though all these people are getting killed, it's his people. He's so angry at Lymond for lying. He still is like wanting to protect Lymond once he realizes Lymond's life is at stake, which is just very sweet. I like.
He seems very honorable.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then speaking of characters being scary, Lymond stabbing Gautier. His eyes were cool and cold. His face hardens and changed. Lymond calmly leaned on the knife. He's scary here too.
Yeah. I'm a little, this moment disturbs me more because of Lymond's actions and less because who he's stabbing, because I really don't give a shit about Gautier at this point. But it's definitely an extreme that we've never really seen him turn on his own people like this before. Now, whether Gautier is really his own people or not, that's a question. But, this is not the way to get somebody to do them what you want. At least not a Lymond way of getting people to do what he wants them to do. So
yeah, I think this is another sign of the drugs, because it's just like his ability to manipulate people is usually, super strong, and he is completely failing to manipulate Gautier in this situation. So I think it's like he overplays this.
Yeah, it's awful because Gautier is not a warrior. He's an old man. So even as terrible as a person that he is, you shouldn't go around stabbing old men just because they're, selfish. It's clearly Lymond is not behaving like himself.
Yeah.
And I think it's also related to what he does after Una dies, which there's no drug excuse there. That's very early, where he kills the man who had helped capture her and enslave her, where he's under so much pressure that he's making moral choices that are very dark.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh.
Next section?
Sure. So Jarrett finally arrives. Archie has sort of gone his own way at this point. They split up because Archie's like, well, you guys are coming with this train of the old man and Marta. So I'm going to go my own way and see if I can find the child. We learn that Gautier is planning to buy a workshop/house somewhere in Constantinople, and that's where Pierre Gilles plans to stay. And then in one of the last stops before they get to Constantinople, I believe it's a town called Bursa, they learn that the Emperor Sultan Suleiman has killed his own son Mustafa. And then they arrive at the embassy and learn everything that's happened, including the point that Lymond has disappeared. At this point, I think they're maybe 4 or 5 days after all of the things with Lymond happened. They certainly are a little bit later because Lymond has already disappeared. So,
yeah.
I think one of the interesting things is, what do you guys think is going on with Gilles, Gautier, and Marta? Because we have Gilles super didn't like Marta. Marta is adhering him like a warder to some elderly captive. And even though Gilles doesn't like them, they're all buying a house together.
Yeah. And Gilles is the one that sort of warned.
Know about? The whole house plan? I got the sense that he is actually not in on the house plan, that it was Marta who said that. Which is interesting. So
Gilles is also the one that warned Jared against traveling with them. He was like, I'd stay away from those two if I were you, and then never gave any more information about it. So
we don't know. But there's some weird animosity / working together situation going on there, what's happening there. Also, just before we move on deeper into this section, I love this bit with Archie where two things where he's going to go off on his own and try to rescue the kid. And I'm just like, go Archie, you know, because he's got like legitimate disguises. He's got legitimate reasons for being in the city, and he can make his own way and super competent. And he's just going to like sneak into the house of the Nightingales and snag the kid. So that's my hope. It's not going to happen, but it's my hope. And then also he confronts Jared about his drinking, and it's just like, oh, are you going to be sober? Or are you going to be drunk? You know, and I thought that was good.
Interesting parallel, by the way, with Jared and Lymond both having an addiction in this book.
But Lymond's not really aware of his addiction, unfortunately. You'd think that after all the times he's been poisoned and like the how deep into his addiction with alcohol that he got, that he would be aware that something is happening.
Yeah, but if it happened like super slow, if they were just eating in teeny tiny amounts that slowly increased, and just, you know, like the pot's slowly boiling kind of thing.
I guess I don't know enough about opium addiction to know if you can be given obviously smaller doses will lead to smaller things, but
I mean, it's basically laudanum, which is the same thing happened to Victorian women all the time. Would be given laudanum and like slightly higher and higher doses and all that.
Yeah, well, it's slightly higher and higher doses so that he's getting used to it. So he only feels the effect when he has withdrawal symptoms, right? Like, remember the time he ate with Daramon outside of the embassy and then he got really sick? It was because
he got shaky
getting the opium. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he knows something is wrong, but he has no idea what it is. Like when we get to that section, it's very telling. He doesn't know anything about how opium works. He asks all these really one-on-one questions of Mikhail. He has no clue.
You could assume that it's just an after effect of when he got stabbed in the shoulder.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it flat out says like he got used to just ignoring the symptoms of his body and powering through until he finally realizes like something is finally fatally wrong. So I wanted to point out a couple things in this section before we move on to that section. One is we have another one of those lovely moments with Marta where her kind of passion and joy comes out on 431, where they get I think they're like getting their horses reshoed or something, and they get change, and the change it comes in the form of these old coins from the days of Alexander, meaning Alexander the Great. And it says Jared sensed her excitement, and when Jill later identified them, it blazed out, her eyes sparkling, her face illumined with eagerness. Then the flame extinguished and she was careful again. So there's this just really beautiful and really sad, like this joy and passion and interest in Marta that she has to be so cautious to hide, and sometimes she can't quite hide it and it comes out, but because she's never had anyone who cared about her, was good to her, she's tries so hard to keep it hidden so that she doesn't get hurt. But
and I love the thing that's making her so excited in both cases is like antiquity. It's like this piece of history that she's found, and it's like this connection to the past, and that is what just she finds utter delight in that. And
why do you think that is what like speaks to her?
I mean, her presence sucks. Like, I mean, it just could be like the romance of history in the past, and the like romance with a capital R, not a lowercase r, and the, you know, the sort of that mythical nature of the past, and the kind of losing yourself in the story of it all. And she doesn't seem, I mean, her present and future are not that great.
It could also be that history is something, it's a mystery that you can solve with study and by finding new things. And then in her current case, her mystery, she may be afraid that she'll never be able to solve it.
Yeah, I think all that's probably true. And I think also she's similar to Lymond. She's really smart. She's got this huge like intellectual curiosity and fascination. And it's just like, it's just joyous and wonderful that there's so much to learn about, you know, the world and about history, and finding these things that can teach you something about the past. And also like you said, like her life really kind of sucks, but here's this fantasy of this other possible lives that, you know, people have led throughout history. And then there's another wonderful character moment right below that where Gilles is like giving Jared orders that he's going to call on him. And she says, there was no object in pointing out yet again that he was not a paid employee, that he was concerned with a quest of his own, that the length of his own stay in Constantinople was problematical at the least.
It doesn't matter.
He's been telling him over and over, I don't work for you. I might not be available. And Gilles like, no, I'm not hearing it. Like, you're going to show up when I need you.
You should transcribe the Latin, like it's not.
You guys help me dissect giraffes. And then I also just love the bit right after that about where they bring the snow down for Suleiman's sherbet, and how they like collect it from the mountains and keep it in Constantinople, and just how cool that is that like so long ago you could preserve snow long enough to like have a city where you could get frozen, ice drinks. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, wait, what page are you on?
432.
Yeah.
You will see the horses bringing down the snow for Suleiman's sherbet. It's taken to the Sublime Port and kept underground till needed. They did it in Nero's time too.
Yep. Pack it in sawdust and it'll stay frozen. So weird. That's what they do with
They didn't have refrigerators yet. They could have just put it in a freezer. Yeah. Just looking back really quick, Laura, that moment where Marta sort of gets really excited about the coins and then immediately sort of composes herself. It's a moment, and I think it's one of the first moments where she acts like this, where Jarrett's not the one that ruins it.
True. Mm-hmm. She just kind of covers it up on her own, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Speaking of Jared, there's this bit. There's just it's so Jared. At the bottom of 432, where he says, "What if they find Lymond dead?" So it says, "If Lymond could come so far and risk so much for the sake of an idea of duty and compassion, which had nothing to do with the affections and concept of evil, quite apart from the cause of revenge, then he could do no less." And it's like he's so off in what he thinks Lymond is doing. It's just like, no. Like Lymond is not like some abstract notion of justice is what Lymond is fighting for. Like, no, not at all. And then it says, he had, looking back painfully, he himself had done almost as much freely and gladly for the opposite reasons, because he cares so much, This is all he had done. All he had done had been done for Lymond. With the vanishing of that star from his firmament, he had found nothing to take its place, nothing to drive him but heat. So he's just like, the only thing that is driving him is being annoyed by things because he's lost Lymond, who was a star in his sky.
Lymond really is to him almost the same thing that Gabriel was. Like, he needs this leader to follow, and he can't see people as human when they're his leader. He idealizes or he demonizes, right? Lymond is an ideal, now Lymond is the devil. Same with Gabriel. But I do like his self-awareness that at least he realizes that all he had done had been done for Lymond.
Yeah, true. Oh.
So another thing is the death of Mustafa that Suleiman watches as his son is killed, and it says within the royal pavilion he'd failed to discover his father. Instead, there awaited him 3 mutes with a bowstring, which they knotted and pulled around his neck. It was said that from behind the hanging, Suleiman watched his son die. So every time you see the reference to 3 mutes with a bowstring, that's what it's referring to. And again, this just recurring theme of children dying and parents hurting their children, like Gabriel hurting his child.
Well, and it's telling because that's what we get in the next 2 sections when we focus on the kids, which I really don't want to talk about, but we have to.
Yeah. They're just being tortured. Like, the children are being tortured. Let's not dwell on it.
No.
We'll go through it quickly.
Okay, so first we get Carradine, who's in the House of the Nightingale. There's an awful moment where we talk about cages and the fact that Nazik, who is the Nightingale master, could put him in this cage and heat it over iron. He's only ever done that once, but still the fact that he threatens him with it is terrible. And obviously Karedin is having an awful time with it. He's had an awful time throughout the trip on the boat with the sponges. And then he got sold to Nazik, who's holding him for a specific person. I wonder who that could be.
And beating him daily.
Yeah. And then we jump to Kazukoyam, who's also being beaten for the way he reacted in front of Gabriel when he was asking about Philippa, which I just love that nickname. Yeah, these poor kids.
And also, I wonder when Gabriel's son was branded, because clearly they both have been, or else they wouldn't be mistaken for each other. So
it was young enough that he doesn't remember it anymore. So,
or doesn't remember it clearly.
Well, and remember, Gabriel's son, the one that Jolita gave birth to, was shipped to Dragout's place in Algiers. So presumably it was at that time. I think in the section about Karedin, it starts out with, despite his thinness and pallor and the dark rings which came so easily under his eyes, the child Karedin grew daily more handsome, flat-backed and blue-eyed. Just reminds me of Lymond. Again, I feel like we keep getting these parallels between the two, because Lymond here we have, because of the opium addiction, these references to his thinness and pallor. And we've had in the past references to the dark rings under his eyes when he's exhausted. So again, I feel like with the imagery, she keeps drawing parallels between this child and Lymond.
Here's a question that I just had a thought. If Gabriel's son was branded when he was with Dragout, and if that was before Lymond's son was sent to Dragout, then was the whole like minor wife, like angry branding the baby thing actually just to make this baby match the other baby? Like, was it all part of Gabriel's plan? Because whichever one of them was branded first, the other one had to have been branded just to match, not for any other reason.
Well, so, my son was born in Dragout, so he wasn't sent to Dragout.
Oh, that's right. But I'm sorry, but wouldn't Gabriel's son have been at Dragout's before Una was there, or after?
Not necessarily, because Lymond's son was born there, and then at some point Jolita's son was sent there. I had always assumed, I could be wrong, but I had always assumed that Jolita's son was sent there to be branded so that Gabriel could make it harder to tell them apart.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, whichever one was done second was clearly done to match the other one.
Yeah, so I assumed Gabriel had his son done second, so they would match.
Oh. Okay, so then we get Philippa being really smart and eavesdropping everywhere.
Yes. So Philippa is actually the one that discovers the spinet is out of tune. She is called upon to play it. She realizes the one note is terrible. So when she investigates, she finds a little note tied around the key, written not by FC or Francis Crawford, but by the Monsieur Comte de la Lymond et Sévigné. It's like L and S and all of this stuff. So she sort of uses her logic and intellect to realize, well, of course this is Lymond, because if it was Gabriel trying to lay a trap, he'd probably just write FC or something. So she also is there when Roxolana gets the diamonds and writes a response. So she makes sure to take the 6-pointed star that was on the message in the key and return the message with that. So sort of making sure that Lymond knows that Philippa got the message and is sending it back, which I think is extremely clever of her. They're sending messages to each other secretly.
I love this bit before all of that, though, where it says she took a long time to approach the Sultana's private apartments and a long time to find her way back. She sometimes took a long time even to turn the handle of the door, particularly if the visitor was Gabriel. After all, she understood very little Turkish, and certainly not Turkish spoken softly and fast without an interpreter. So she's listening to, like, she does understand Turkish, and she does understand Turkish spoken softly and fast. So she is just soaking up all of the intel she can and doing it very deliberately. And I love that.
For sure. She's getting more and more capable, I guess. So yeah, Lymond signed it C, D, L, and S, which is Crawford of Lymond and 70. And I love how Philippa is so insightful and figures out what's going on with him, right? That only he would have signed it that way. And then I'm curious why it says Philippa pulled the card off and regretfully burned it. Why is she regretful about burning it?
I don't think she wants to let go of this connection. I think it's a concrete connection to Lymond and a sign that he's crying about her. And obviously, she has to burn it. She can't keep it. So.
And the only connection she's had with the outside world since she's been put in the Seraglio.
Yeah. So people are still, it's a sign like she hasn't been forgotten. She hasn't been abandoned here. Like people are thinking of her.
Yeah. And then when she sees the diamonds and her eyes fill with shocked tears, and she realizes that Lymond is risking a fortune to get her and the kids out of there.
Higher fortune. Yeah.
And I think she realizes that right then she realizes that that plan has failed, which is why she runs back to her sort of room and cries. She's like, oh, he's trying really, really hard and it's not working. Yeah. But like, she's both heartened that somebody is still trying to get her out and the fact that it's not working.
I mean, I do think a large part of the tears, though, are just her realization of how much Lymond cares, because it says she's shocked by the diamonds. And it's just like, this is tangible, concrete evidence that Lymond is giving up everything he has to get this little boy and her out of the Seraglio. And so I think a lot of the tears are just her sort of recasting her image of Lymond. I'm riding that ship into the sunset. All right.
And then we have the last little bit of this chapter, which I thought was initially incredibly confusing, because we start talking about this old blind storyteller man named the Meta. So the Meta is being sort of led around by a servant named Ishik, and they're sort of telling stories and like staying in different people's houses. And I was like, why is this important at all? But it's important.
Well, I totally thought Ishik was Lymond when I first started reading it.
Well, Lymond imposter syndrome, sure.
I was totally suspicious that this kid was Lymond, and then I realized, well, we're getting it from his point of view, so that's not true. So yeah. So I figured one of them was Lymond.
These two men do find the Meta and offer him a place to stay. It turns out it's McCall and one of his friends. And it turns out the Meta is actually Lymond. It's sort of been his disguise while he's been wandering around, going through severe opium withdrawal because he's no longer around an Offrian, so he's not being dosed. And he sort of answers all these questions. He immediately realizes now that he knows he's been being fed opium, who the traitor in the camp is, and McCall sort of saves him. So
he has this connection with his son as he's telling stories, and we get another picture that really harkens back to his relationship with the young queen, and just his ability to connect with children and tell stories that children love, and kind of draw his son closer and closer to him as he tells stories.
Yeah, it kills me. He told short, strange stories in which a child always triumphed, even over the great something himself. And to the small one from the nightingale shop, he was always gentle, talking slowly and clearly, until the boy would stand almost touching at his knee. Then he would run away. And I feel like we have this with Mary, Queen of Scots. We have this with Kevin, where he's so good with children, and so he's found a way to be close to his child, but then he also, or one of the children, but then he also has to let the child go. He can't save him yet, and that must be absolutely devastating. So also the Nightingale dealer's shop is right by the Bayezid Mosque. So Lymond's storyteller rotation keeps taking him back there. So I'll show you pictures of that mosque as well, because we also went there for the Lymond tour. And that was an interesting one because it's not a touristy one, unlike the Blue Mosque or the Suleimani Mosque. So it was more like what sort of day-to-day mosque was like. Alas, there was no Nightingale dealer shop, probably for the best. But yeah, here it is, and then there's a bunch of like pictures of it here. You're gonna see what it's like inside. Oh, that's blurry, but there we go. And pictures of the outside. So again, there was no like, I think there was like a little shopping passageway near it. There wasn't like the gardens from the 1500s, but still cool to be there. So then the thing with Mikhail, I think, is just fascinating because, again, he has no idea. So Mikhail assumes he knows because how could you be addicted to opium and not know? So he's like, did you not have any money to buy more of what you need? And Lyman's like, I have money. What was it? And he has no clue. And then there's the line here. I don't know if you guys remember, but I read it, I think, in one of our first book clubs because to me it says so much about Lymond and what he's like, and it has a bunch of applications kind of throughout the whole series, which is, you have all the afflictions of the highly strung, Sibylla had said to him once long ago. All your life you will have to disguise them, which makes me wonder how good that advice is, because he has gotten so used to disguising what's really going on with him that he's really has difficulty communicating with other people and being open and honest about what's really going on with him. But also, in order to be successful in the world, it does sort of make sense. Like, he is a super, super sensitive person, and he has to completely hide that in order to reach the positions that he reaches. And just so much of what the facade he puts onto the world is not who he is underneath.
Also, Mikhail's an interesting person in this scene. Are we suspicious of him still? Like, I was suspicious of him before, but he seems pretty cool in this. I don't know.
I think he's totally working for Guzel, and that Guzel this is proof that she's not siding with Gabriel. At least this is my interpretation. So
that's a really good point.
Yeah, and I think she sent him to sort of find him and get him off the drugs, or help him with the withdrawal, at least, because he's been off the drugs for like 5 or 6 days now, it seems.
Like, he's super vulnerable. Lymond is so vulnerable in this moment, in this scene, and Mikhail really seems to be trying to both help him but also give him agency, where he's like, you can do this or you can do this, and it's like, I can help. He's sort of like, okay, I will help you, what do you want to do, which is impressive.
Well, I think that's also important that Mikhail phrases it as a choice. You can go cold turkey, you can slowly wean yourself off of it, or you can just keep going and die, basically. And Lymond, I think it's really important that Lymond makes the choice. He has the choice and he makes the choice. He's going to keep taking it because he has to save the children. So he's not only giving up his fortune, he's giving up his health and probably his life in order to try to save the children.
Which is exactly what he would have done anyway. Like, that speaks to his character. He's been this way through the entire journey. So
but it's a really awful thing. And there's also a bit here that I think is very effective, where Lymond's thinking about it, to end with nothing accomplished. Know that this world's life is only sport and play and gaiety and boasting among yourselves and vying in the multiplication of wealth and children. Indeed, Gabriel was great. Just great in this terrifying, powerful, destructive way.
And it is true, like when he says Lymond has a choice, but Lymond says, I have no choice.
Mm.
You know, and that in his own head, abandoning his plan, abandoning the children and Philippa is not an option. So he has no choice, even though he is given options.
He would never put himself over them. That's the thing.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, what's gonna happen?
Yeah, what do you think?
I don't know. We're getting close to the end. It's going to build up. It's going to ramp up the excitement from here.
Yeah, I can't wait I really can't wait to see what's going to happen in the Seraglio, and like, what is Philippa going to do? What is Kaya Katoom going to do? What is Roxolana going to do? How does Marta play into everything? I'm really looking forward to the women. Like, what are they doing? Yeah.
I think she's done a really good job of, like, you know how the whole arc of the story, you have to have the moment where the heroes look like there's no possible way for them to succeed. And I feel like by throwing this, like, Gabriel's in charge, Lymond's addicted to opium, he's no longer the ambassador, like all these things is
he's pretending to be a poor blind old man.
Yeah. You're like, how in the world are they gonna get out of this one?
Yeah. And I was trying to think of like how many wild cards we have that haven't come into play yet. And so it's like Archie's a wild card. We don't know what he's going to do. Jared and Marta are kind of wild cards. We don't know what they're going to do. Gautier's kind of a wild card a little bit because he's a jerk and we don't like him, but he doesn't seem to be traitorous. So like, is he going to do something?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so like those things are sort of in play, but we haven't seen them engage yet in stuff.
I would put Guzel and Mikal in that list as well. How are they going to react to it all?
Right.
What kind of power do we have within
story right now? And so I was just thinking of like who's not in the story in Istanbul yet. And
right.
I guess Gautier. So it's like it's really Jarrett, Archie, Marta coming in from the outside.
But there's definitely like what is Guzel's game here? What is her goal? What's she gonna do?
Yeah. And we still don't know what Marta's goals are. We don't know what Gautier's goals are. We don't know what Guzel's goals are.
Well, and you know who else is probably gonna show up and save the day? Dandy Hunter.
I thought you were gonna say the Ishimon, her besties.
No, I've got to throw my one Dandy Hunter reference into at least each book. So he's been gone for quite a while now.
I'm gonna guess no.
He's Lymond's secret brother.
Ooh.
I called it.
Brother. It's been Dandy Hunter the whole time.
Okay. But then Lymond's never gonna see him again, so he can't be the one who saves the day.
Oh, stop! I forgot about that part.
No, I do not think so.
Do you have any guesses? Like any guesses about Guzel's game, Mark's game, like what these people want?
I am so clueless. Do we know where Guzel is from? Like we know Roxolana is Russian and has like a Russian heritage. Do we know the same? Do we know like because Guzel has some sort of like
reference that I think there's a reference that she's like a bastard child of a powerful Greek family.
Oh.
Yeah, I thought she was mentioned as being Greek earlier.
Okay. Well, that throws that line. I thought maybe she's got some sort of tie to all of this in some way, but maybe it's just like she sees thwarting Gabriel as the best way of protecting her power base, and like I'm not sure that she's deeply emotionally connected to all of this. I remain clueless about Marta. Just I cannot figure out what she's doing other than just trying to stay alive. You know, like she's trying to the best of her ability to stay alive, and she doesn't trust anyone to be on her side.
I don't know if there's enough book left to really get all of Marta's story. Like I totally see her sticking around after this one book. I don't think she's
I hope so.
I'm gonna go away now character, unless she dies, but let's not
Yeah,
think that that's gonna happen. So
surely she'll stick around. More books. I feel like there's a lot. They got to deal with I even have to have some sort of like sibling confrontation book, but
and I really don't think we're going to get any concrete answers about Lyman's parentage until that final book. Like, because that's been a mystery almost since the very first book. I mean, there were only tiny little hints of it there. And, you know, you wouldn't even really pick up on it unless you were reading the books in the way we did. But still.
I'm a little bit sad that I think my theory, because early on, I was really suspicious that Richard was illegitimate and Lyman was legitimate. And like that was what the mystery was. And that because I thought that would be so interesting for Richard's identity and Lyman's identity. But I think that's kind of blown out of the water because it's because the whole Marta's mutual parents thing, it seems unlikely. So I don't know. It seems unlikely that like Marta and Lyman would be I can never remember his name. Gavin. It seems unlikely that Marta and Lyman would be Gavin's children and Richard be someone else's child, especially based on how Gavin treated them, Richard and Lyman.
So if they are Sibylla's children, who's the mystery father?
King Henry.
Random French guy? Like, I don't know. King Henry.
Why not? He's got enough bastard
children. Remember who is his father, the king?
Francois the First.
Yeah. No. Sure, why not? That would be. Yeah, no clue. And I'm trying to think of like men in France. It's not Gautier. I think that's ridiculous.
God, it better not be.
No. And do we know any other like older men that we've been introduced to in France? I mean, the guys sort of on the edges of the French court. There was the general guy or
Anne de Montmorency.
Maybe, I don't know. Yeah.
Or one of those four sort of barons, nobles that we met in the second book was an older gentleman, the one who was in England for most of the book.
Right.
I think Saint Andre is the oldest.
Yeah, I think that's the one I was thinking of.
Is he the one who was in England?
I think it's in England, but yeah.
Hopefully it's not to Engen, because that would be really creepy. Although I don't think he's nearly old enough.
He's young. Yeah, that would be gross.
I don't know if we have even met who the real father is. I don't know if that's,
Yeah, I'd be surprised if we have, because that seems, I don't know.
Somebody wants attention. He's so cute.
I think she likes the book club because I'm talking, so she thinks I'm talking to her. Any other guesses or hopes or predictions for the rest of the book?
No, I think we're in for an exciting ride from here to the end. So we'll see. Yeah. And hopefully there's not too much tragedy. But there probably will be, because I just said that.
I feel like the hope for not a lot of tragedy is a bit futile.
I know.
I literally have to like gear myself up every Saturday to read this section, because I'm just like, what horrible thing is going to happen to a character I like today?
Oh, I'm curious why you feel that way. Like what in the book is making you kind of...
Well, I think it's just the accumulation of the 4 books and having like so many Saturday mornings where like I was super sad because somebody died, and just life, I think just in general, like the pandemic is getting to me. And
summer's coming, vaccines are coming, it's gonna get better.
Yeah, my number 2 vaccine dose is tomorrow.
Yay!
I hate you, congratulations.
Yeah, definitely. I'm jealous.
I wish you guys had it.
I'll be in the last category. So
Oh, it's awesome. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. Don't let the depressing book get to you.
Yeah, so it's like, we're gonna read the book. And I mean, I am confident that we'll have some sort of victory at the end. I feel like it's not gonna end, in tragedy. But I think it's gonna be like the end of Disorderly Nights, where it's like, yeah, there's a victory, but like we snatch defeat from the arms of victory by like Gabriel escaping. So it's gonna be like, yeah, there'll be some sort of victory happen. Like, I think Philippa and the kids will get rescued, but I think there will be some sort of complication that makes that, like, that leads us into the next book, or makes it not, it won't be rainbows and pots of gold, So.
All right, should we wrap up?
Yeah.
All right, thank you everyone for watching.
Take care.
bye.